Hello Loom knitters! This tutorial is on how to loom knit a rib stitch beanie. I've placed the ribbed hat on a bag of sugar here just to give you a better idea of what it looks like when it's stretched out on a child's head. And once I take it off the bag of sugar, it gets pretty skinny, but don't worry about that, the rib stitch makes it very stretchy. So thanks for watching Ms. Yarn. If you'd like to subscribe, that would be amazing. I really appreciate your support. On this loom knitting channel, you'll find instructions that are clear and easy to understand. Today we're going to cover number 1, how to mark your loom so we don't mix up our knit stitches and purl stitches. Number 2, how to do a cast on, and it's a cast on that I haven't seen on YouTube before. Number 3, how to do the rib stitch. And here's an example of a ribbed hat that would fit a small woman's head or a teenager's head. Number 4, how to decrease the crown so the top is not too bulky. Number 5, how to do the gather bind off. And finally, number 6, how to tighten up the cast on so our hat looks even more polished. For the supplies you'll need a 36 peg round loom that has a 3/4 inch gauge. Mine is from a 4-pack made by Loops and Threads, and I bought it at Michael's. You'll also need 1 ball of yarn. I used Wool Ease Thick and Quick with a number 6 weight. You'll need a hook, a pair of scissors, and a yarn needle. And you may want to use something to mark the pegs of your loom. I used purple elastics. Okay, let's begin. I've marked my loom in preparation for the 1x1 rib stitch, which means we alternate 1 knit stitch with 1 purl stitch. So I mark pegs 2, 4, 6, and other even pegs with purple elastic because purple means purl. And on the odd pegs for the rib stitch body, I'll use knit stitches. To start the cast on, we're going to make a slip knot. The tail doesn't need to be very long because it's going to grow in size later when we tighten up the cast on. So just take your slip knot and put it on the anchor peg. Next, we'll do E-wraps around the entire loom. I like to work towards the left, which is clockwise. I'll wrap each peg back to front all the way around the loom. Here I'm E-wrapping peg 36, and now to secure these E-wraps to the pegs, I'm going to do true knit stitches. So on peg 1, I lay my yarn above the loop. With my hook, I go under the loop to grab the working yarn. I pull the yarn downwards to make a new loop. Then I take the old loop off the peg and I put the new loop on the peg. And then I tighten things up. So on peg 2, we'll do the same. We lay the working yarn above the loop. We go under the loop with our hook to grab the working yarn. We pull that yarn down to make a new loop. We take the old loop off of the peg and we put the new loop on the peg. Then we tighten it up. You're going to continue doing knit stitches all the way around the loom. See you in a few minutes. I've jumped ahead and I've done all of my knit stitches all the way around the loom. I'm just working peg 36. And now our cast on is done. Now we're ready for the rib stitch body. We'll do a 1x1 rib stitch, which means we knit, purl, knit, purl. We'll do that for several rounds. So you already know the true knit stitch from the cast on, so let's do a true knit stitch on peg 1. Purl on peg 2 by laying the yarn below the loop. Go into that loop from above with your hook. Grab the working yarn and pull upwards to make a new loop. Take the old loop off, put the new loop on the peg, then tighten it up. Then we knit on peg 3. and we purl on peg 4. And those purple elastics remind us when we're supposed to be purling rather than knitting. As you can see, we're using a true or traditional knit stitch for this project rather than my usual E-wrap, and that's because I'm going for a flatter look for this hat. Here I'm just taking off that slip knot and I'm just going to put it towards the center of the loom. My project is for a 10-year-old child, so I'm doing 26 rounds of this rib stitch. And when I take those rounds plus the 4 rounds for the crown decrease, it's going to leave me a height of 7.5 inches, and that's what I'm looking for. Now, while this tutorial is for a child-sized hat, I did want to mention that if you're looking to make a hat for a teenager or for a woman, you could do the rib stitch for 31 rounds on this same loom, instead of doing the 26 rounds of rib stitch for a child. In any case, you're going to go ahead and do the rib stitch on your own at this point, and let's meet again when it's time to decrease the crown. So I've completed my 26 rounds. I'm just going to show you the right side of this hat. So now for round 27, the objective is to go from 36 stitches to 27 stitches. We're going to be decreasing over 4 pegs. So I'll be referring to pegs 1, 2, 3, and 4 to demonstrate this technique. To take away every 4th stitch, we're going to move the loop from peg 4 to peg 3. Now knit on peg 1, purl on peg 2, and knit on peg 3. So this time you're going to have to go under both of those loops at the bottom. Grab the working yarn and pull it downwards to make a new loop. We need to take both of those old loops off of the peg. Now it's pretty hard to do with your finger, so you're probably going to need your hook. So we get the old loops off the peg and we put the new loop on the peg. Now let's work our next set of 4 pegs. Move the loop on peg 4 over to peg 3. Keep the yarn behind any empty pegs. And let's knit on 1. We go behind empty pegs, not in front of them, so that our hat doesn't get too holey. Purl on peg 2. And then we knit on peg 3. So again, we've got to go underneath these 2 loops. We grab the working yarn to make a new loop. Now we need to take that off of the peg and we'll put the new loop on the peg. And then we tighten it up. Very good. Now we'll go to the next set of 4. Let's move 4 to 3. We'll knit on 1. We'll purl on 2. And we'll knit on 3. So again, let's go underneath those 2 loops. We'll make a new loop with the working yarn. With our hook, let's take the old loops off the peg. We'll put the new loop on the peg and we'll tighten it up. Okay, very good. So on your own, you're going to decrease the crown by working 4 pegs at a time. Let's meet when you're done with this round, which is round 27. See you soon. So I've jumped ahead to complete round 27 on my own, and now for round 28. So we are going to knit, purl, knit. So we knit on peg 1, purl on peg 2, and we knit on peg 3. We will knit on 1, purl on 2, and knit on 3. So go ahead and knit, purl, knit on your own, and let's meet when you're done this round. Now we're on round 29, and we want to decrease again, this time over sets of 3 pegs. So I'll be referring to pegs 1, 2, and 3 as I show you this technique. Move 2 to 1, knit on 1, and knit on 3. Okay, let's do those steps again. We're going to move 2 to 1. We'll knit on 1. It's always a bit awkward for me since I'm working on a table rather than on my lap. There we go, we knit on 1. Then we knit on 3. I forgot to mention earlier that this decrease is supposed to make our hat go from 27 stitches to 18 stitches. So with that in mind, you can complete this round on your own, and we'll meet in a few minutes. Now we're on round 30, which is the final round. And this is super easy. You're just going to do knit stitches on every other peg. What I mean by that is you'll be doing knit stitches on pegs that have loops on them. So a knit stitch on peg 1, a knit stitch on peg 3, then on peg 5, and so on. So go ahead and do this on your own, and let's meet when you're done in order to bind off. At this point, we've completed 30 rounds, and we're going to do a gather bind off. So we'll wrap our yarn 3/4 of the way around the loom, and then we'll cut it off. Next, we'll use our hook to bring the yarn up the loop on peg 1, and then up all of the other loops. After going up the next peg, let's just pop it off, and let's do that for the rest of the pegs as well. So this is pretty straightforward. So let's meet again in a minute or two when we're done this step. So I've worked my way around the loom. I've gone up peg 35. And now let's go up peg 1 just one more time. And then we're going to remove our item from the loom. Excellent. I'm going to have a look at this hat now. What I want to do is make it inside out. So this is right side out. Let's make it inside out. We'll know that it's inside out by seeing those bumps at the crown. Now I'm pulling on the yarn to cinch up at the top. At the beginning, I go pretty gently because I don't want to break the yarn. Now the hole is nicely closed up, and that's thanks to our crown decrease. There are only 18 stitches at the top, so it's not too bulky. So next I'm cutting the tail even shorter so it's easier to handle. And I'm going to thread my yarn needle. And I'll go around that circle about 1 time. And then I'm going to tie a knot here, and then I will weave in the tail. I'll let you continue that part on your own so I can get to the cast on. I'll finish weaving in that end later. Right now I want to turn the hat right side out to stretch out the stitches and look at these lovely columns. The crown looks fantastic and the body is really stretchy. Now let's find the column with our tail, and let's pay attention to the knit column on its right. Identify the strands at the bottom of those knit columns or V columns, and the strands at the right of those V columns. Let's begin to tighten this cast on by pulling on the strand at the bottom of that V column. Now let's tug at the strand on the right of the V. So we're pulling it gently towards the left and then out. Let's pull at the bottom of that V. And then the strand at the right of the V. And pull it to the left so that it doesn't catch. Let's go under the V column. And then to the right of that V column. So by pulling on the yarn at the bottom of the V columns and then to the right of the V columns, you'll remove the slack and your cast on won't be loopy. But don't overdo it by taking out too much yarn, since your hat needs to stretch out onto somebody's head. But if you do make it too tight, just go back and loosen it up. Another tip is to pull towards the left. That will help the yarn move more smoothly. So on your own, you're going to continue tightening this cast on, and let's meet when you've reached your tail. Now I'm almost done. I'm pulling at the strand at the bottom of that V column, just to the left of the tail. Now I'm going to find the strand at the right of that V column. I'm just going to pull it up. You can see all of the extra yarn that I have there. And now I'm pulling the tail towards the left. I'm taking all of that extra yarn with me. And now I have successfully tightened my cast on. And this is all of the yarn that I've taken out. So I'm stretching it out again just to make sure I can get over a child's head. And now I'm going to weave in that tail. So I'll cut off the yarn a bit, and then I'm going to thread my needle. And I'll turn my hat inside out. And then I'm going to weave up one of the columns. I'll just bring the yarn closer to the inside of the hat first. Then I'll weave through the right stitches of this V column. You can keep weaving in your tail on your own. You don't need me for that. And now the Loom Knit Rib Stitch Beanie is done. Thanks so much for watching Ms. Yarn.